Because your promised land is actually your inheritance according to the Bible. Because God said to Moses and the children of Israel, you're going to inherit the promised land bit by bit. It was always a land that was allotted by inheritance, by gift. Because it was promised in Abraham before the law. So it's by inheritance, so you actually enter your land by grace. And when you come out of your wilderness season, you come out strong in the power of the Spirit, like Jesus did. The Spirit of God is on you because you've been hanging out with Him. You've been hanging out with Jesus. Acts 4:13, the Pharisees and the religious people took notice that Peter and John were untrained, uneducated men, but they recognized that they had been with Jesus. That's when they were being persecuted, when they were arrested. They had been with Christ. They'd walked with Him. They got to know His ways. Right? They said, make us sit on your right hand, on your left. And He says, that's not my ways. He that is the least shall become the greatest. That's my way. So when you look at the Word and you look for ways, you're going to get to know God and how He thinks, how He feels, how He operates, how He functions. And then you learn to apply that way in your life. And God says, if you apply the same way, it'll work for you. And guess what? We'll walk together. It's hard to walk with God when He's going this way and you're going that way. I'm going to do my way, Lord. Well, Proverbs speaks to that. It says, many are the plans and ways of man, and the end thereof is death. Hello? But His way leads to life. So the Word of God becomes your grid to interpret your life. See, without the Word of God, prophecy is ineffective. Because without the Word of God, we don't really know what God's saying, because we can't say this is the address from the prophecy when we don't have a map to point to in His Word. When we don't know the ways of God, we don't know what God's really saying. It could mean 1,000 things. Right? It could be interpreted 1,000 different ways, what God just said to you. Would you agree? And so, let's know His ways. The way was to know the Word of God in a difficult season, a wilderness season, because God was about to bring him into the promised land. They could have gone from Egypt to the promised land. But you see, what God wanted to do, the real reason God did this, through the Word of God, He wanted to recondition their thinking. And He wanted to get a slavery mindset out of them that had penetrated their thinking for 430 years. They lived as slaves for 400 years approximately. And generationally, parents passed that on while they held on to the truth. They struggled with the conditioning of slavery in their thinking. That I'm a servant and I must do and I must earn reward and pleasure in life. And God says, no, I'm bringing you to wilderness. Well, I'm your provider. I'm going to bring manna down from heaven. You never heard of such a thing. I'm going to feed you. I'm going to love on you. I'm going to take care of you. I am who I am for you. Will you believe my word right now? That I'm more than enough. You don't need natural resources. You don't need Egypt and the big cucumbers in Egypt. You don't need that. You just need me. You don't need the little garden that you used to water by foot, because in the promised land, I'm going to bring you to fields that you can never water on foot. They're so long you can never walk them. You're going to call on the rains of heaven to water the gardens and the agriculture that I'm going to give you in my land. That's my plan. But your mind has got a garden mentality that you water on foot. But I have a field mentality of abundance. In the promised land, I'm about to entrust you with abundance. In Egypt, you've had scarcity. And in the wilderness, you've had just enough by a miracle provision that I've provided for you to show you that man does not live by bread only, that you work for generations, but man lives by the word that proceeds out of my mouth. And if you believe my word right now, I'm going to get you out of the wilderness season. And I'm going to bring you into the promised land. Because if you think you're subject to temptation in a difficult season, no son, no daughter, you're even more subject to temptation in an abundant season. Because when you come into abundance, when you come into blessing, when you come into the grace, when you come into more than enough, that's why we have to remember the Lord our God, who brought us out of Egypt, who brought us through the wilderness, who gave us the power to create wealth. And remember, it is to establish His covenant. So the wilderness season is a necessary transaction to really steward the land of promise that He's given you and I. Because that, my dear friends, is the way of God.